Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 9th Torah Fund Stands with Israel event. I am Lori Snow, the International Torah Fund Chair. Torah Fund has been the designated philanthropy of Women's League for Conservative Judaism since 1942. We are especially glad to have everyone gathered here today in the spirit of Am Yisrael Chai, as Israel continues its war against Hamas in the aftermath of the horrifying October 7th attacks. Our International President, Julia Loeb, would like to say a few words. Julia?
I don't see her on.
And I think we'll hold off on those words. Thank you. Before we begin our program, we muted everyone so we will be able to hear our presenters without background noise. We plan to answer questions after the presentations. The general chat has been disabled. So please send your questions via chat to Rebecca Goldwasser. You may also click on reactions and then click to raise your hand emoji. It's my honor to acknowledge that as well as our current Women's League board, we have past Women's League international presidents and past International Torah Fund chairs joining us today. Also, participating today are Marilyn Berkowitz, International Torah Fund Chair, and Central Great Lakes Torah Fund VP, Rebecca Goldwasser. Torah Fund supports programs and scholarships for students at the 5 conservative Masorti Movement Global Institutes of Higher Learning, including the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, known as JTS, the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, the Schechter Institutes of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem, who we hold especially close in our hearts today, Seminario Rabbinico Latino Americano in Buenos Aires, and the Zacharias Frankel College in Potsdam, Germany. With the generosity of donors like you over the past 8 decades, we have raised over $109 million. We are an unusual philanthropy, as our dedicated fundraisers are all volunteers from Women's League of Conservative Judaism affiliate synagogues throughout the United States and Canada. Funds raised support important educational initiatives and special projects for the training of our future rabbis, cantors, teachers, scholars, and Jewish community leaders. Our thousands of committed Torah Fund donors help strengthen and ensure the future of Judaism worldwide. At this point, we would normally invite you to donate to Torah Fund, but today, in view of the ongoing situation, we ask you to consider donating to Israel via these charities. Karen's posting these charities in the chat. We listed the American Friends of Megan David Adam, Friends of the IDF, United Hatzalah of Israel. The Torah Fund campaign of the Women's League for Conservative Judaism is administered by the Jewish Theological Seminary, where our Torah Fund staff members manage our philanthropies outreach, engagement, promotion, donations, and data processing activities in conjunction with our wide network of Torah Fund volunteers. We are excited to present this series in support of Israel, especially now, and hope you find it informative and educational. Now I'd like to introduce Marilyn Berkowitz, our wonderful Torah Fund Vice Chair. Marilyn?
Thank you, Lori. Good morning or good afternoon to everybody. Today I have the honor of introducing my rabbi, Stuart Vogel, who is the co-senior rabbi at Hamakom Place. Rabbi Vogel and co-senior rabbi Richard Camras had the vision to create Hamakom, a welcoming community with the motto of transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. Previously, the senior rabbi of Temple Aliyah, Rabbi Vogel has held many positions within the Jewish community. He is the immediate past president of the Rabbinical Assembly, a past president of the Rabbinical Assembly of the Pacific Southwest region and the Southern California Board of Rabbis. He is also the co-author of the national bestseller, The 10 Commandments, The Significance of God's Laws in Everyday Life. A rabbinic fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem in 2017, Rabbi Vogel received an honorary doctorate from the Jewish Theological Seminary. Rabbi Vogel.
There we go. What a pleasure and honor. That was quite the introduction, Marilyn. Thank you so much. It feels like this has been my Torah Fund weekend, because last night, actually, at Hamakom, we had our Torah Fund event where we honored 2 of our women, and just what an event it was. I can't say enough about Torah Fund. From my days as a rabbi at JTS, as a rabbinical school student, and benefiting from it, I've always had remarkable leaders from Torah Fund, from Women's League, who have been part of my life. When I was rabbinic intern, Temple Israel Center of White Plains, some of you may remember a name of Selma Weintraub and her husband Tiny, who were my introduction to remarkable people, and thereafter have had the greatest women who have been part of my synagogue and part of my life. When I arrived at Temple Aliyah, some of you may remember Margaret Carlton, of blessed memory, Annie Dater, of blessed memory. Now blessed to have Marilyn Berkowitz, who is just an amazing leader for our community, and I know for the international community as well. So it's an honor to be able to be here. By the way, I can't forget your CEO, Rabbi Ellen Wollens-Fields, who was a student with me and a dear friend, and I know what remarkable work she does for Women's League. Your theme for learning since October 7th has been standing with Israel. And it's important to understand the history of the crisis and the facts on the ground that to be able to respond. Just last night at the event, Torah Fund event, a congregant came up to me and shared with me that she's been part of a hiking group for a long time. And she just within the last week went on the hike, I guess it must have been last weekend. And she was wearing one of those dog tags in solidarity of Israel that says, bring them home, and has the name of a hostage. And someone asked a woman about it. She was explaining when an older man walked by and just with great anger and just venom said they deserved it. It was a long time coming, those Israelis. And she was taken aback. Like, how could somebody just spout that kind of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, just such hatred? So we live in new times, but they're not so new, by the way, if you think about it. Many of you remember the slogan, Zionism is racism. United Nations Resolution 3379, 1975. Thank God in subsequent years later, 1991, I think it was revoked, one of only 2 United Nations resolutions that had been revoked. So from the very beginning, the land of Israel, we have to know, has been inextricably connected to what it meant to be a Jew. The land is promised to Abraham. You all know that. This is why the archaeologists and historians today wish to engage in historical revisionism. If you don't know about this, it's so important that there are scholars out there, the archaeologists and historians, who are trying to negate the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. And they're trying to disconnect us to that heritage, to say, see, it isn't about our land. We, not only is the land of Israel part of the original covenant, it's the raison d'etre of the existence of the Jewish people. And so we need to remember, and I want you to think about this as well. Some of you may know about the explanation of the 4 cups of wine at the Passover Seder and where it comes from. And the rabbis take it from verses that we just read last week from our Torah portion about the Exodus. 4 expressions of redemption: Hotzeti, Hitzalti, Ga'alti, Lakachti. According to the rabbis, Hotzeti, I will free you. God's declaration. It was the Emancipation Proclamation, basically, that God said the Israelites are free. But they didn't leave yet. That's the second language, Hotseti, and I, right, Hisalti, rather, I will deliver you. That's when the Israelites actually left Egypt. The third one, Ga'alti, I will redeem you. That's when the Israelites are saved at the Sea of Reeds. And then the fourth one, V'lakachti etchem la'am, li la'am, I will take you to me as a nation. And that's the giving of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. And so those are the 4 cups of wine that we drink. But by the way, leave it to another rabbi to realize that in the following verse, there's another 5th language of redemption that says, V'heveti etchem la'aretz, and I will bring you to the land. You see, that was the ultimate motivation of leaving Egypt, was to get them to Israel, to the land of Israel. And many of you know that story about the spies went into the land and they didn't have faith to be able to enter into the land. And so they have to wander for those 40 years. So the rabbis have, by the way, a challenge. What do they do with this 5th language of redemption now? Do we drink 5 cups of wine during the Seder or not? Well, you know, we only drink 4. So where's the 5th? What happened? Some of you may know that becomes the cup of Elijah. And why is it called the cup of Elijah? Because according to rabbinic tradition, all the questions we have, unanswered questions about Jewish law, Elijah, when he comes to announce the Messiah, before that Messiah comes, Elijah will answer our questions. Tishbi yataretz kushiot ubayayot. The Tishbite will answer our questions and our uncertainties. So we have that cup on the table. And by the way, for millennia, it represented the idea, if you will, of unfulfilled redemption. When we didn't have relationship in terms of being a people on our land, that cup sat there as a symbol of the disconnection of a dream that was unfulfilled. But then 1948, that dream becomes fulfilled. Israelites, the Jewish people, able to re-enter the land, to claim it. Now, by the way, we know the Jews have been there throughout history, something unknown to a lot of people. They see the Jews as conquerors, as modern colonialists. You see, they don't understand our narrative. It's been conflated into so many of the political issues that we face today and that are challenging around the world. And people just don't understand. This isn't about conquest. It's about returning home. You see, we have for a long time had to talk about Israel, to defend Israel. But today it's different. I'm so glad that you are having speakers about Israel to understand the new dynamic, the new tensions, the new language that's necessary. It's not enough to yell back. It's not enough to say that you're an anti-Semite or an anti-Zionist. That's the beginning of calling out hatred. But do you understand the issues enough to be able to respond intellectually and to be able to give an answer which will resonate today? Throughout the ages, the rabbis, Maimonides, and others always knew they needed the answers of their time. I believe that we need the answers of our time, new answers in this age. So I'm so glad that we have the speaker today. I know who's going to share with us, and he's going to be able to enlighten and answer questions for all of us. May the safety of Israel, may it always be at the forefront of our minds. May those hostages come home. May our people be able to live and dwell in peace, and may they always be a blessing. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Rabbi Vogel, for joining us today and your inspiring words. Returning home, I jot out a few notes here. The new answers, they're all things that are in our hearts, and we thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Yuval Donio-Gideon, our primary speaker this afternoon. With a distinguished 6-year military career in the Israeli Defense Forces, Yuval Donio-Gideon has been Consul for Public Diplomacy at the Consulate of Israel in New York since 2022. He began his tenure in the Diplomatic Cadet Course of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel in 2006. In 2007, He served as the Deputy Ambassador of Israel to Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Burundi. Then was assigned to the position of Deputy Ambassador of Israel to Finland and Estonia in 2008. In 2013, Yuval returned to headquarters and was a critical member of the Congress Relations Department in the North America Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From 2016 to 2022, Yuval was the ministry's representative to the Planning Directorate of the IDF. He holds a BA in Psychology Political Science and an MA in Political Science, both in honors from the University of Haifa. Yuval?
Thank you very much, Nori, and thank you all for being with me today. It's really a great pleasure to share this afternoon with you. So what I thought is that I'll share a short presentation about what we do in the consulate as a whole and what we do in this particular time of war, and maybe a few points about the events. And then I'll be more than happy to relate to any ideas, comments, questions that might come up. So, as mentioned, I've been a diplomat in recent 18 years. In recent year and a half, I'm here in the consulate in New York as the Consul for Public Diplomacy. And the consulate has several departments which deal with various sides of our work here. The consulate is responsible for Israel relations with 5 states that we're covering, which would be New York State, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Ohio. And we do so on the political sphere, the public diplomacy sphere, media, cultural affairs, and consular affairs. Now, in particular, my department, the public diplomacy department, handles 3 major pillars in regular times. One is the major events that the consulate is either producing or taking part in, such as the Israel parade that's been held every year, Independence event, and so on. Second thing is all our outreach to the civil society, NGOs, community leaders, think tanks, and others. And finally, all the work with the academic institution in the 5 states that we're covering. We have 4 Ivy Leagues universities and many other distinguished institutions that we're in touch with. As far as the war goes on, so we had 2 major targets from the beginning of the war. One was to maintain and broaden the scope of legitimization of the IDF, to act guided by the Israeli government, so to maintain that and to broaden that. The other one was to act accordingly with the government decision for the safe and quick return of our hostages in Gaza. This has been our targets. It didn't change from the beginning of the war. And practically almost all of our daily actions since October 7 are around those issues. The consulate as a whole held a lot of meeting and briefing to elected officials, dozens, if not hundreds, of interviews to the media, many events that we participated either online like this one or in person. We've been assisting Israelis at the beginning of the war that needed to get home quickly in order to be drafted to the reserve service. We coordinated a lot of donations from people here that decided either to contribute their professional abilities or time or money, and we match it with the needs in Israel. We used cultural performances to amplify what's going on at the war scene and to have people identify with the cause. And we've been dealing with a lot of delegations that came here. Most of them are delegations of family of abducted people in Gaza. I'm also defined within the rest as the POC in our consulate to that issue. So I've been watching this closely. And we're just finishing today a delegation that spent all week in Washington, in New York. What is unique about her to some extent is that all the families are families of abducted women still in captivity in Gaza. One of them has been murdered. The others are hopefully alive and still in captivity. So we held events and interviews and so on for them here. Some of them already took off to Israel. Some are still on the way. That's, I think, the main concern of us as a consulate since the war broke. Now, a few points about what we're seeing and maybe what each and every one of you is facing, as I assume that if you're on this conversation, the issue of Israel and the war is close to your heart, and sometimes it's a bit confusing because of all the pushback there's around. First of all, it's good and it's even essential to be well acquainted with the facts, particularly the fact of the atrocities, what happened on October 7. There's a lot of fake news, a lot of denial. If anything, this war is unique in the sense that I don't think there's ever been such a sharp contrast between the quantity of the evidence, many of them, by the way, because Hamas filmed, documented, and broadcast everything it did. So the scope of evidence is amazing, but there's a sharp contrast between that and the broad denial of what happened. I'm not speaking about those who said it's justified. To begin with, the denial of what happened, the murder, the rape, the brutality, we're still facing that. And yes, there's denial of other atrocities as well from Holocaust and others, but never did we have such a sharp contrast between the evidence and the denial, the scope of the evidence and the scope of denial, which is really unthinkable. Which brings me to why people look at it this way. And I've been dealing with the American scene for quite a while, and I can't figure out a logic explanation for people either denying what happened in spite of the clear evidence or just justifying that. The only logic explanation that I could think of is a deep dehumanization of the victims because they're Israelis, because they're Jews, most of them, by the way, not all of them. And this dehumanization is purely anti-Semitic. This is really, I'm not counted with those who like to go to the anti-Semitic explain usually. But as much as I thought about it, I can't figure out how people who've been, for example, fighting decades, women who've been heading organizations of women's rights and assisting the victims of sexual violence. And when we offered them to come to a discussion about that with Israeli experts that got the information about the gender-based crimes that happened on October 7, some of them did not show up. And the reason they gave to us in writing was that we have to deal with the root causes of the rape, which is shocking and awful thing to say. And when it comes from women who for decades leading organization dealing with victims of sexual attacks, even more so. There are no root causes of the rape. Rape is rape is rape, right? And as people who were attending the event learned that, they were appalled and said that this is not only anti-Israeli and not only anti-Jewish. This takes back the whole struggle against sexual violences decade back to the point that many of us, and I'm sure many of you remember, that women had to justify that the rape was not something they invited, as you had a short skirt, so you had it coming, or you sat at the bar on your own and drank, so you had it coming. we thought that we're no longer at this point. The victim is not the one to blame, always. And to hear that again from people who deal with that decades really takes us back so many years. So it's not only an Israeli thing, it's not only a Jewish thing. Those who are in denial or trying to justify the atrocities that happened on October 7 are simply undermining the fundamental basics that the free society is standing upon. And this goes way beyond Israel. And this is partially what caused, I think, the highest official from the president onwards to give such strong statement and assistance to Israel. And this is something to remember if you've been inquired about that. This has nothing to do about policy. This modern pogrom is not about Israel oppressing, yes or no, the Palestinians or violating the human rights, because it doesn't make sense. So if Israel is oppressing the Palestinians, then it's okay to rape hundreds of Israeli women. That's the logic. If Israel is violating human rights of the Palestinians, it's okay to burn alive babies. What's the logic here? It's very poor academic integrity. And when it comes from 20 years old students that doesn't really understand what they shout, okay. But when it comes from supposedly serious people, politicians, scholars in the academy that say that what happened on October 7 was resilient, it was exciting and exhilarating, it's really hard to explain that in any other tools than anti-Semitism. And this you have to remember and you have to explain. This is not about the conflict. This is not about policy. This is about barbarism, sadism. It's about a brutal terror organization targeting innocent men, women, children, babies. This is what it is. This is light against darkness. This is pure evil. So don't be confused by what people tell you. And that's, by the way, not to say that Israel should not be held accountable for whatever it does before and after October 7. We should. And we want to be held to the highest possible standard morally. And we do our best to do that. We should be accountable to what we do. But it has nothing to do with burning alive babies or raping women or kidnapping Holocaust survivors or all the other atrocities that have been done on October 7, abusing children in front of their parents, murdering parents in front of their children, all kind of atrocities that it's really hard to imagine. And I'm a son of a Holocaust survivor. Nothing compares with the scope of the Holocaust, but it's not only the brutality. I must say that the Nazis tried to disguise what they did, to hide it. Hamas praised itself openly for every kid it murdered, for every woman it raped. As I said, many of the evidence we have is because Hamas broadcast it alive. And so I guess it's a terrorism and barbarism of the lowest kind. And we should be very firm in our righteousness, in our willingness to fight it, whatever it takes. I'm saying we, it's not only Israel. And I think it's very important to reach out beyond the immediate circles of the Jewish, of the Israelis, to friends that we have all around, and to make the case that this is not an Israeli struggle solely. Yes, we're in the front. It doesn't end up here. And I think that in recent decades, the US have learned that if anything, it cannot ignore what happened in other parts of the world. And it cannot assume that America or American people are safe strictly because they're far away. Regrettably, we've learned that this is not the case. And radicalism and barbarism that starts far away from here is likely to come here eventually, and to Europe and to all other free societies. Because always when we have a free society and we have people working very hard to build their life, always there's someone who wants to come and take it away from them. And we really have no choice but to stand strong against those who try to destroy the life that free societies have built to themselves around the world. So I think I'll stop here, and I'm more than happy to relate to particular issues as come by participants.
We have time now for our question and answers. Rebecca Goldwasser is monitoring the chat. Yuval, thank you for your excellent presentation and answering our questions and explaining why we need to stand strong. Okay.
We do have one question right now in the chat from Jelana. Her question is, where are the calls for a bilateral ceasefire? Who would Israel be negotiating a ceasefire with? And her last part of her question, it seems all of the calls are just for Israel to cease firing.
If there's anything Israelis want, I think more than anything, is to come back to the life we had before October 7th. We don't want to have hundreds of thousands of people in reserve. We don't want to have almost 250,000 people forced out of their homes. And we definitely don't want our people kidnapped in Gaza to spend even one day with the terrorists in their bunkers and tunnels. But we also don't want what happened to happen again. And that's the reason we have two causes that we're trying to achieve. Bring them home as soon as possible. And it was great joy for people of Israel to see those who were able, the dozens who were able to come back home from captivity. But also to dismantle Hamas from its military and governing abilities. And yes, we were willing and we are willing to have a temporary humanitarian ceasefire in order to get our people back home. But otherwise, we have all the intention to walk the talk, to do what we said we will do. And that's to dismantle Hamas from its terror abilities. This is not out of vendetta. This is not because we're furious, and we are. This is simply because that's what you would expect every decent government to do for its citizens. This is the fundamental, basic, first, I'd say, chapter of any unwritten agreement between the citizens and their country, definitely in democracies. The notion that you will go to sleep and you will know that you will not wake up in the morning when the barbarian cross the border and kidnap your kids from bed. This is our obligation as the Israeli government. And although we failed delivering that on October 7, we have no intention of enabling that to happen again. So a humanitarian ceasefire to get the hostages back, definitely. A ceasefire before we are able to achieve our goals, this is not something we'll do. In order to get our people back, we're willing to speak to anyone. We speak to the Americans, and we speak to the Russian if necessary, and the Egyptians and the Qatarian, and anyone who think he might have a leverage in promoting the cause of bringing them back home, because we will not spare an effort or we'll leave no channel unchecked. But beyond that, we're still very firm in our intention to dismantle this.
Are there any other questions? Right now, I do not have any other questions in the chat.
I have a question. What's going on at the UN? I mean, I would think you have access to more than we can see from the media.
Yeah, I'll just say, as a preface, say that although I sit in New York in the consulate, I don't deal directly with the UN affairs, because that will be the UN mission, which sits with us in the building, just in another floor. But I'm well acquainted with what happened. First of all, we have to remember what is the UN. It's about the only organization in which all the governments of the world agree to cooperate under certain conditions. It's very limited in what they agreed to work with, but still it's the only organization that we have of such kind. But it doesn't take away the government's powers. So by most part, the UN is only capable to do what countries enable him to do. Now, different from when the UN was established, I think there were 57 members following World War II. Now we have over 190, I think it's 194. And most of them are not what you and I would define as free societies. Regrettably, for all kinds of reasons, those countries tend to align with the Palestinians on our issues and not with the Israelis. And the outcome is that the Palestinians have almost an automatic majority in everything they bring to the table. And that means also the anti-Israeli decision. Now, it's different in the Security Council because the United States of America, as the other four major superpowers, has a veto power, and then anti-Israeli decisions cannot move forward without the American agreement. But so the U.S. friendship is shielding us in that regard. But there is a public voice, a moral voice to the UN assembly, but we try to look at what we call a moral majority. So when there's heavy biased anti-Israeli decisions, we see which are the countries that vote against Israel and which are the countries that vote with Israel or abstain. And usually you'll have all or most of the free world with us alongside the United States. And then you'll have countries like North Korea or Iran or Syria or Venezuela voting against Israel. So if this is my political foes, I'm humbled. I'd rather have a so-called minority of pluralistic democracies on my side than the majority of tyrannies and undemocratic societies. Now, it's not unimportant what happened in the UN, and we spend a lot of effort and political will or fortune to try and change things. We have some success, but it's an uphill struggle, which is still going on. I guess it will always be with us in those times. But it's also the irony, because those who support Hamas does not really support the Palestinian cause. Hamas is against Palestine in so many ways. First and foremost, it oppresses its own people in Gaza. It's a horrible regime to its own people. Brutal tyranny. Second of all, I imagine Hamas ruled Gaza since the military coup. It did in 2007. There's a reason there's no elections in Gaza. Hamas doesn't want election. And the Palestinian Authority, who's the legitimate sovereign power, supposedly there has no say in what's happening in Gaza. And it is okay, you can be pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian at the same time. It does not contradict. You could be pro-Palestinian and anti-Hamas. You could be pro-Palestinian and anti-war crimes. It doesn't contradict. And that's the irony. Those who speak highly of the Palestinian rights are many times just maintaining the power of the terrorists, and in doing so, harming Palestinian rights and Palestinians' ability to have some kind of an independent functioning state in the nearby future.
Okay, we have now several questions in the chat. So I have some other kind of questions. Hetty wanted to know what happened to our ability to know that this was being planned, the war on October 7th, and going forward, what will change to have better info to know what is coming so this cannot happen again?
That's a fair question. First of all, we screwed up. We didn't do a good job in foreseeing this coming. And there is all the intention to, once we're done with the war, to go to the depth of it and learn what we're able to learn from that. There's a lot of people angry, furious in Israel about what led to that, and they have all right to be. And the government responsibility and the military and the security apparatus responsibility is to check themselves and to come out clean and to share with the public what really happened. And I'm convinced that what will happen once the war is over. And I hope that the next time, if there will be a next time, let's hope there's no, but if there will be, we'll prepare ourselves better and we'll foil that. As we do in so many cases. Every year we have dozens of hundreds of terror actions that are prevented, and because we're able to foil them. But regrettably, many times you don't have 100% success, and we failed on this one. I hope that we'll come more humble to the next challenge, which enable us to have a better view of reality and better protection to our people. But it's always so much easier to predict the past than predict the future.
So another question, thank you for that response, from Steffi. She wants to know, how do we convince other countries that these are inhumane people that need to be annihilated?
Stick to the facts. Don't let the fake news get over. Speak up. The evidence are there. There's plenty of them. I won't traumatize you, but you can find over the web easily evidence of almost all the horrors mentioned. Against babies, against women, against civilians, brutality in a very graphic way that we saw maybe to some extent with ISIS, but I don't think to that extent and that scope. So evidence is there. And one effort we make is to expose people to that. You might have heard of the Bear Witness film that the IDF produced. It's 47 minutes documentation of what happened on October 7, based on street security camera, based on dashboards, based on victims' phones, but mainly based on the GoPro cameras that all Hamas or most of Hamas fighters had on them, because they intended to document everything. And many of them that we've killed, we were able to get what they filmed. And much of the evidence comes from that, but also from forensic work following that, witness of people. And there's no other way to explain the horrors that happen rather than terrorists being inhumane, try to terrorize us, try to break our soul, because this is really what's about. Not undermining any life that was lost on October 7th and since, but Israel is strong, and that many people, it was not the intention to annihilate Israel through killing that many people. It was to terrorize and break our spirit. And I think we could be part of not enabling them to win by going out, speaking strongly about what happened and being willing to engage. I'll just share an anecdote. The families of the abducted women that we had here, we had a very big event for them at Friday evening in New York with many dignitaries. And some have shared that while standing along with Israel, they have lost many friends. And those are elected officials got a hit, but also others lost friendship of 30 years. People whom they've been fighting shoulder to shoulder for many years about women's rights or children's rights or human rights. And those people just evaporated on October 7th. So yes, you might pay a price. People might be pissed off that you're standing along with your truth. I think it's important for you to do so. It's important for Israel to do so. It's important for our hostages that you'll do so. And it's not going to be easy.
Beth wanted to know that this week medicine came in for the hostages. What has the Red Cross been doing all this time, and is the Red Cross being able to get to into Gaza? What can you tell us about that?
The Red Cross is able to go where parties enable him to go. In our case, he's able to go to our prisoners of war or whoever we detained. In their case, there's zero access to the Red Cross to the hostages. We don't get any information at all from the Red Cross. It's not accessible to them. We don't even have a genuine confirmation that the medication indeed got to the hostages, which was part of the deal. That's not surprising. It's Hamas. They never stood up to anything they agreed upon. And I think the Red Cross, on one hand, is probably limited in what it can do. It's not a state, it's not an army. It is dependent on the goodwill of the side to cooperate with him. On the other hand, it's also been reluctant to say the obvious, and that is to reflect that it does not have access to the hostages. It does not have a way to verify their situation or the condition, or even if they're alive. So it fails to do so for its own reasons, and we try to bring them to at least reflect that openly, but success so far is limited.
Okay. Can you comment at all about the efforts of South Africa at The Hague?
Yes, this is indeed another big irony. Israel, who's been one of the members who initiated and one of the first countries to adopt the ICJ convention, in order to maintain everyone remembering what happened on the Holocaust, is now being pursued for allegedly making genocide. And I think it's mainly a struggle of South Africa, who's in that regard a proxy of Hamas, to limit Israel's abilities to fight against Hamas. We think we had a compelling arguments in front of the court, and we hope that we will not stand or will not confront a situation that the court tries to limit Israel's abilities to fight the terrorist. It might regrettably be the situation, but we hope not. And if not, it will, as I hope it will end up in just being a noisy attempt to justify an anti-Semitic barbarian attack on Israel, which will fail.
Okay.
Thank you. It's 1:53. We probably have a question for one more, and time for one more question, Rebecca.
Okay. I think I have two questions there. I think are short answer that maybe Yuval can answer. What are the best media outlets in Israel to go for the most accurate, least biased information?
I think that media in Israel is free. Some of it is more professional than the others, some are less, but all in all is free. I think many of them make a genuine effort not to have fake news on their channels. So by and large, Israeli media is reliable. And of course, you have the channels, the official channels of the IDF spokesperson, of the Foreign Ministry, which contain a lot of information about a lot of stuff that's happening. Yes, it takes us slightly longer to get the information because we verified its validity, but you're more than welcome to follow the IDF spokesperson and the MFA various platforms in order to get information.
Thank you for that. And for our last question, can Israel welcome visitors now, and should we plan trips?
Yes, Israel can welcome visitors. I know of many friends from America who has been going recently to Israel in recent months. Deliberately, some of them are going to the front as well to see the kibbutzim and the cities that were affected. But also in the center and in the Dead Sea and Tiberias, you could meet families of evacuated people. You could contribute in many ways. And if anything is important, again, is not to let them break our will. So if you had intention to do a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah in Israel, go ahead with that. If you're doing business with Israel, go ahead with that. If you're able or willing or intended to donate money, go along with that. And if you have family members that you were considering to go and see them. They'll need your support. And this is a long struggle. It will not be ended, I suppose, in coming weeks, maybe not even coming months. So it's a bit reminding me when I moved to New York, a lot of my Israeli friends asked me, but is New York safe? There's crime in New York. Well, you know, there's hazards, potential hazard everywhere. I think for the most part, most of Israel is fairly safe currently, and we are able to take most of the fighting into the other side, and I hope it will sustain that. And also, we have also, thanks to the American friendship, the Iron Dome and the Arrow and the David Sling, who keeps our cities and villages relatively safe. So bad things could happen, but are not very likely. And I encourage you and urge you to come back and be with your mishpucha in Israel.
Well, thank you. There were questions that we were asked in the chat, Lori, so I don't know how, if we just want to forward them on or how we want to deal with some of the questions that we didn't have time for.
We'll figure out what to do with those. It is, we tell people this is going to be an hour. We're at 1:56.
Thank
so
you.
I think we do need to stop. Yuval, I want to thank you for your excellent presentation and for answering our questions. You gave us information and many things to think about, and we appreciate that.
Okay.
Another way to help Israel is to buy Kahol Lavan, blue and white. Karen is posting a link in the chat for the Israel Export and International Cooperation Institute. And you can see information about consumer direct and business-to-business companies in Israel that you're happy to share with you. I do have a note from our international president, Julia Loeb, who is on the road. And she's with us today, but she is not able to speak from where she is. Julia wants to know she appreciates everyone who joined today and our speakers for the information they shared. And I would like to thank everyone who worked behind the scenes to bring this program to fruition. Lisa Paul, our Torah Fund Director, Marilyn Berkowitz, Torah Fund Vice Chair, Rabbi Ellen Wallens-Fields, Women's League Executive Director, and Karen Molina, Women's League Member Relations Manager. A special thank you to Karen for your smooth tech support and to Rebecca Goldwasser for helping with questions and answers. Thank you, everyone, our guest speakers, our guests here today, for your support of Israel and your dedication to Torah Fund. We appreciate everyone joining us. Good afternoon.